It's time, man. Hey, the talk is over. Now they got to deal with it.
Okay, you can go ahead and write it down and put it in
The
there.
Arizona Cardinals select.
Now everyone knows.
It is time. There's the Cardinals, the draft room, a real-time look at the decision makers around the big table, a big decision forthcoming for the Big Red. Cardinals are on the clock, and we are on the air with Cardinals Draft Central, brought to you by our Arizona Ford dealers, Paul Calvisi, voice of the Arizona Cardinals, Dave Pasch. Dave, we're moments away from the card getting submitted, and man, the anticipation is big. And Lisa Matthews she has security clearance. Where are you, Lisa?
Yeah, guys, I'm right outside where the magic happens, where the decisions are made here out front of the war room. Now, it's pretty quiet up here right now, but expect some commotion later on when we have team owner Michael Bidwill, GM Steve Keim, and, of course, your first chance to hear from the first-round draft pick later on in the show.
First reaction from the first-round pick. Thank you, Lisa, our Cardinals insider, ready to go outside the draft room. So, Dave, no more of the mock drafts. This is for real. And there are some real wants and needs. And all the picks are being submitted this year through Microsoft Teams. And in front of us, you see we have the Microsoft Surface. So go ahead. Unveil. Go ahead. Give us your election night coverage here, Dave. Unveil your big needs.
Let me just start by saying these are the needs, but I don't think the Cardinals are going to take any of these three because the first guy off your shutdown corner, the two guys are gone. Your dynamic wide receiver, the three guys you would have taken, they're gone. And the offensive linemen who can play right away, they're gone. So let's just X this out, Paulie, because I think they're going to take the best player available. I think that's going to be Xaven Collins from Tulsa.
All right, let's go back to Lisa then. Lisa, what do you have on your Microsoft Surface?
Yeah, Dave, I have to agree with you. There was no cheating before the show looking at your board, but I had the same thing. Of course, everyone wants to see that void fill at the cornerback position, but don't think that's going to happen here right now. Tight end. Dan Arnold left, obviously, so looking to fill that role, maybe more of a pass-catching receiver-type tight end, and then, of course, O-line to bolster that up. But again, Dave, I agree with you. Don't think that's how things are going to shape up here today.
Right, well, I agree with you to a degree. I have the elite shutdown, lockdown corner at number 1, but I went with elite pass rusher at number 2. Look, you're set right now. Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt and Marcus Golden's on board, but all three of those guys are 30-plus years of age. So you need the next guy, the next generation of pass rusher. Is that guy there? Drew Grigson, director of player personnel, told us in the Big Red Rage recently, that's the deepest position group in the draft is edge rusher, which never happens. Now, is that guy there that you would feel comfortable taking at 16? Maybe not. Maybe that's a round 2 type selection. How about this, Dave? How about that middle linebacker? How about someone to go with Isaiah Simmons for the next decade or so, the Mike linebacker? And I put the M in MLB stands for mean. I want somebody nasty who teams are going to think twice about running at.
Well, the Cardinals pick is in. Roger Goodell has not announced it yet. I think that's who it's going to be. In fact, I'd be surprised if it wasn't number 3, a middle linebacker, to pair with Isaiah Simmons, to have 2 rangy, long, athletic guys. You strengthen the middle of your defense.
And look, if the NFL is a copycat league, what did Tampa just do, right? They just went with Devin White and Levante David. We've seen Bobby Wagner in the division. We know what Fred Warner does for the Niners defense. And not to jump the pick because it is in, but earlier this week we were talking on the Big Red Rage, and you did name a name. Go ahead with the prospect you were thinking of.
Well, again, I think this is going to be Xavin Collins here. He's a player that a lot of the people that are making the decisions right literally above us had a very high grade on. And because the 2 corners that they really liked are gone, the 3 receivers that they really liked are gone, not surprisingly. And then you had a couple of offensive linemen that you thought maybe could slide. Those guys just went. So at this point, I mean, Caleb Farley was linked to the Cardinals for a while. There were a lot of injury concerns about Farley. And then there was some news today that maybe the medical reports were inaccurate or that certain doctors had positive medical reports on Farley. But I think ultimately it's too risky. And again, I think they go best player. And in my mind, and I believe in the Cardinals' minds in terms of how they have their board, that's going to be Xaven Collins, who is a 6'5", 260-pound middle linebacker with great instincts, very intelligent, and a guy that makes a lot of plays, especially in the passing game, believe it or not.
Yeah, but if it's Isaiah Simmons and Xaven Collins, you're talking about a pair of athletic freaks with unbelievable measurables. Let me throw this out, though. What about the possibility that they do have a corner rated this high? As we watch the commissioner come up to the podium, and we'll get the pick momentarily, we don't know how they have the rest of the corner class rated. Maybe there's someone worthy of the 16th pick, perhaps. Maybe it's more of a round 2 type selection. Let's look into the war room, and we'll get a – check this out. This is a real reaction from the Cardinals as the commissioner comes up and makes the selection, and we get the pick. And there you see the owner, Michael Bidwell, Steve Kine, the GM, head coach Cliff Kingsbury and company. And Dave Pasch, there you go. Xaven Collins, the linebacker out of Tulsa, nearly 6'5", nearly 260 pounds, and a guy who was a high school quarterback and converted to linebacker when he was at Tulsa, and he just cleaned up last year in terms of the awards. He won the Nagurski Award for the top defensive player. He was the top linebacker in the country. And once again, his athletic skill set and measurables are off the charts, are they not?
Yeah, and it's interesting because Micah Parsons was another player that was linked to the Cardinals, but he's not a middle linebacker. And there were some other concerns with Parsons. But with Xaven Collins, the only thing that I had heard about him was he's got to be a little bit tougher. He's got to use his hands a little bit more. But in terms of his athletic ability and the potential, I think at number 16, look, you're right in the middle. You like Xaven Collins. You have a high grade on him, so you don't want to risk it by trading down. You take the guy that you had in the top 10.
It's just hard to believe a guy who's 260 and nearly 6'5", and he has the athletic ability to play middle linebacker and go sideline to sideline. I'm looking at some of his stats this last year with Tulsa. 53 tackles, a team high 11.5 for loss. He had 4 sacks. He had 4 interceptions. He had 2 pass breakups.
Yeah.
He blocked a kick. He returned 2 of his picks for a touchdown, including a 96-yarder. Nobody caught him from behind.
Paulie, if he's at another school, if he's at a big-time program, Tulsa's a good program, but if he's at a Power 5 school, I don't think anybody would be questioning this decision. I think one thing that maybe helped the Cardinals, and one of the reasons why Xaven Collins was under the radar, is because this was an unusual year. The only Power 5 school that Tulsa played was Oklahoma State. You know, normally they played Ohio State a couple years ago. I know when Andy Isabella got drafted, one of the reasons the Cardinals liked him was the tape against LSU. He had a big game against some of the teams in the SEC. So you didn't have that film from this year. Basically, you're going off of games against similar competition. A lot of times with these smaller school guys, you see them against a power team, and you're like, wow, that guy belongs on the other sideline. But you didn't really get to see that. I think there was a little concern that Xaven Collins was going to go to New England. But when Mac Jones fell, I think this worked out how the Cardinals hoped it would. They get the player they wanted.
So you have a guy who has the size to play some smash mouth football and stop the run at 6'5", 260, but he has the range to go sideline to sideline, get into those passing lanes. And from the scouting reports I'm seeing, he has the football IQ as a former quarterback. He has that ability to diagnose the offense, diagnose a play, and get a sense of the passing lanes and where a quarterback might want to go with it. As we mentioned, he had 4 interceptions a year ago. So think about that now and what it might do for Isaiah Simmons, in that we know his positional flexibility. So now if you're Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator, think of the possibilities. I think to me it just frees up Isaiah Simmons to be even that much more of an X factor, if you will.
It was a tough year for Isaiah Simmons, a guy that played so many different positions, to all of a sudden come in, have a limited training camp, no preseason games, and try to learn how to play just one position because he played so many. So I don't want to say it was a lost year for Isaiah, but those first 4 or 5 games, he's just figuring out NFL speed. He's trying to figure out, okay, where am I supposed – and the Cardinals are going back and forth with, okay, do we move him around or we just say, okay, you're playing the will? And I think this year that I believe it's just going to be you're the will. You're the will linebacker. Xaven Collins is the middle linebacker. This is how we're going to roll. It's interesting. Somebody sent me some clips from Xaven Collins earlier this week. I'm watching him, and I sent this person who's an NFL personnel guy. I said, boy, he looks like Khalil Mack. And he said the measurables are he is 2 inches taller and 12 pounds heavier than Khalil Mack. And think of the freakish athlete that Khalil Mack is. And you've got, now Xaven Collins isn't the pass rusher that Mack is, but he's that kind of athlete, but a little bit bigger and a little bit longer.
I mean, you got me right there. A bigger Khalil Mack. I saw some of the comps for Xaven Collins were Leighton Vander Esch of the Cowboys, who had an unbelievable start to his NFL career.
Tremaine Edmonds is the one I've heard a lot. He's with the Bills. He's been to 2 Pro Bowls, and I think he was the 16th pick in the draft a few years ago. So I think that Cardinals look at Edmonds for the Bills and hope that Xaven Collins can be that guy.
And look, Jordan Hicks redid his deal. So the veteran middle linebacker, if he's a member of this Cardinals defense, you tutor under him. You get that sort of mentorship from a Jordan Hicks. You work into the rotation. Once again, he probably has the ability with his athleticism to play some will at times, freeing up Isaiah Simmons to be that strong safety, that X factor. We'll see exactly how that goes. But, you know, Isaiah Simmons a year ago, when he had those games with more snaps, he actually played better, it seemed like. The couple of games where Devondre Campbell was limited because of injury, the 2 games against Seattle in particular, Isaiah Simmons, when he had the big interception in overtime that led to the big primetime win, and then the game at Seattle where he had 10 tackles and a sack against Russell Wilson. Those games where he had more snaps, Isaiah Simmons seemed to perform better, and I'm guessing that's not going to be a problem this year. He's going to be a big cog in the middle of that Cardinals defense.
It's interesting, right? The Cardinals have been looking for inside linebackers for a long time to replace Daryl Washington, because Daryl Washington, until he had his personal issues, was a player on the ascent that looked like he was going to be one of the best players, not just for the Cardinals, but in the NFL on defense. And Hassan Reddick, you drafted him. He was a guy you weren't sure, is he a pass rusher? Is he an inside linebacker? They tried it inside. It didn't work. So last year you go Isaiah Simmons, best player available. A lot of people had him in the top 5. He falls to 8. This year, a lot of people are going to see this pick and say, wow, you took a linebacker 2 years in a row, but he's a completely different player than Isaiah Simmons. Plays a different position, different player. And again, you brought up Bobby Wagner and Fred Warner. You've got 2 of the best in the NFL, so I like the Cardinals addressing that position. And when you strengthen the middle of your defense, I mean, it makes everything else. You're good at pass rusher. Yeah, they got to get a corner. But you're strengthening the middle of the defense. And don't forget you got Budda Baker. So you're really good up the middle right now.
You're giving quarterbacks a lot to think about when they come up to the line of scrimmage. Who do you focus on? Hey, a reminder, we're giving away a Cardinals and Arizona Ford Dealers prize pack. That's right, to one lucky viewer, you'll win Ford and Cardinals gear, including an autographed football from our first pick. Tweet your reaction to our draft picks using the hashtag CardsDraftPrize. That's hashtag CardsDraftPrize. You see it right there. One winner is going to be selected at random and announced during Saturday's show. Let's go up outside the war room and get first reaction to the first-round pick. Here's Lisa Matthews.
All right, here with team owner Michael Bidwell. Just give us your initial reactions in being able to select linebacker Xavier Collins here, and have you had a chance to speak with him yet?
I spoke to him a few minutes ago, and the mood in the draft room is we thought there was a chance that the Patriots were going to take him, and it turns out we got a text from the Patriots after we took him, and they said if the quarterback wasn't there, they were taking him. So we knew that maybe the media wasn't focused on him, but a lot of the scouts in the league were really focused on what a great player he is, great person, one of the highest character players that we've interviewed over the last several years, just an incredible person. Was a high school valedictorian, was a high school quarterback, grew up just outside of Tulsa, was recruited to Tulsa, really wasn't on everybody's radar screen, but became just an outstanding linebacker and just really got the heart of a lion. And so he's going to come in. Steve and I have been talking about getting big and getting athletic on that inside of our linebacker core. And between last year with Isaiah and this year with Xaven, I think we've achieved that. So we know that he's going to come in and immediately make a big impact.
Yeah, this is just the latest acquisition in a busy offseason for you guys. If you want to talk about Watt, obviously Hudson, Green, all the players that you guys were able to bring in. How would you just assess the moves that you guys were able to make this offseason?
Well, I think our defense got a lot more physical and we got a lot more leadership. You know, when you look at J.J. Watt, Malcolm Butler, and look at these two young linebackers, as well as Chandler's coming back. We can't forget about that. So we've got a lot of great returning talent. And so I'm very excited about our defense. And then you look at the offense, and we've got a lot better. I mean, you know, we look at A.J. Green and Hudson really strengthening that offensive line, and some of the veteran players that are returning for us. So, you know, we've got that offensive line looks like it's going to be really strong. And so I know that was something we wanted to do, and to make sure that we could really get a running game going and keep Kyler clean. And then obviously with the kicker, that's a huge one for us. He's one of the most accurate kickers in the league, and being able to win games. You know, special teams, it always seems like they're about 3 games a year. You're either winning or losing with a field goal, and we lost too many. We want to get back in the win column with those field goals.
This obviously was still a difficult off-season and college football season to evaluate these players coming in. But did today kind of feel like a bit of normalcy back in the war room with your guys and being able to make this selection?
It was pretty normal. You know, we had our masks and everything else, and we'll continue to wear them throughout the weekend. But there were some good things that came out of it. You know, we were able to do a lot more Zoom calls. And it was something that we didn't really understand fully last year because, you know, we had already completed so many different things and, you know, of the research that the scouts had done. But this year, being able to use Zoom and be able to go from, you know, Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, all the players that we interviewed are used to the video conferencing. So as we got used to it, we realized this is a very efficient use of our scouts and our coaches' times, because they could hit a lot more players rather than having to go from town to town and airport to airport interviewing people.
All right, thank you, Michael. We look forward to the rest of the draft here.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's going to be exciting. We got a lot better today.
And first comments on the first round pick, Xaven Collins, and some interesting tidbits there from the owner, Michael Bidwell. Let's talk Draft-A-Thon real quick before we get back to that. If you haven't heard, maybe you saw it in some of the coverage tonight and tomorrow during the draft, you can join players, teams, and fans from around the country in the NFL Draft-A-Thon, a live stream and virtual fundraiser focusing on real issues facing our hardest hit communities. Go to NFL.com/Draft-A-Thon to watch and find out how you can join the NFL's pandemic recovery efforts. So how about that? That the Patriots texted the Cardinals after they selected Mac Jones and after the Cardinals made their selection of Xavin Collins and said, you know what? If it wasn't for the quarterback, that's the player. That's the direction we were going. And it sounds like that's a Belichick sort of player. If he was the valedictorian, along with being the high school quarterback, we talked about football IQ. Look, Jordan Hicks last year was so instrumental and vital in getting everybody lined up as that veteran middle linebacker, the captain, the quarterback of the defense. It sounds like that's what they're getting in a Xaven Collins.
It is interesting that Michael shared that info, because I believe that was a concern all week, was that even though the Cardinals had him rated very highly, that New England was right in front of him. And I think the Cardinals were hoping New England would trade out of 15, would move up to get a quarterback. But when Mac Jones didn't go 3, everybody knew that if Mac Jones doesn't go to San Francisco, he's going to be there for a while, because Carolina wasn't going to take him. Denver wasn't going to take him. So for New England, it works out perfectly. They get Mac Jones, and now the Cardinals can get their guy. And if the Cardinals don't take Xaven Collins, I just got a text from somebody that said, you know, Pittsburgh was going to take him at 24. Now, you could look and say, okay, well, that's 8 picks after. But the point is, a lot of people liked Xaven Collins, even though he went to a small school, even though, again, this year you didn't have the film that you normally have against Power 5 schools. There was enough to say, along with the character that Michael touched on, his intelligence that you just mentioned, and obviously Michael talked about as well, to say that this is a guy we have to take here. And look, ultimately you go with your grades. And if your grades are top 10 and he's at 16, you're pulling the trigger.
You mentioned Daryl Washington. I had a chance to talk with Carlos Dansby earlier this week. Think about 2013 when it was Carlos Dansby and Daryl Washington. That was a dynamic pairing at the epicenter of the Cardinals defense. And let me tell you, that Carlos Dansby loved the thought of a Xaven Collins being paired up with an Isaiah Simmons and what that can do for a Cardinals defense. In fact, let's go back up outside the war room. Our Lisa Matthews with the Cardinals GM. Lisa, take it away.
Steve, just take us through the thought process once you guys were on the clock and you saw that Xavin Collins was there to take.
Yeah, he was a guy that we had high grades on all along, and a number of things were exciting. You know, we were happy that he was there. Think he's a great scheme fit for us. Can play Mike linebacker. Can also do some things from the standpoint of blitzability. So really smart guy, intellectual. One of the best interviews that we had all spring with the college prospects. So very excited he was there, and know that he's going to be a huge addition for our team.
Yeah, I heard he was a former quarterback growing up. So how much does that QB IQ help him out here, and what stood out to you most when watching his tape?
Well, you see that with his instincts and his ability to identify, especially in coverage. You know, he's really smooth for a big guy. He's almost 6'5", 260 pounds, and he ran in the low 4.6s, high 4.5s, and has that ability again to have man coverage out of the backfield on tight ends. Really smooth athlete, and again can really cover ground laterally from sideline to sideline.
How much better does he make the Arizona Cardinals defense immediately?
Well, I mean, when you think about our inside linebackers now with him and Isaiah Simmons, two guys who are almost 6'5", which is pretty rare and unusual for the National Football League. So having two guys with those wingspans and that length and that athleticism to be able to match up with some of the people in our division is going to be a huge get for us.
For you, just as a true evaluator, just how difficult was it this offseason evaluating players coming in and the shortcomings that came with, obviously, the limitations, no scouting combine and such?
Well, there were certainly some obstacles, more so from the medical standpoint, just because we didn't have as many players at the Indianapolis Combine as we generally would to get medicals on, and we had to get out on the road quite a bit. But I think our coaching staff and our scouts did a great job getting the right information for us and making sure that we can identify the best prospects that we could.
All right, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Matthews right there. You heard the quote. Huge get for the Arizona Cardinals when it comes to Xavin Collins. So fired up about that. Fired up. I know, Dave, you're with me on this one, to see fans in the stands. Again, the Red Sea. Had a chance to talk with Marcus Golden the other day, and he's like, yes, let's pack the stadium. If that's what's allowed, you know what? Let's make it happen. And the Cardinals are doing their part and making it real easy to get out there and attend. Look, you got games against the Rams and the Niners and the Seahawks. Think about the schedule. You got the Packers and the Texans and the Colts and the Vikings coming, right, and the Panthers as well. And look, Cardinals and the players, they can't wait to see you all back in the stands at State Farm Stadium. Secure your tickets now. Just call 602-379-0102 or go to azcardinals.com/season, azcardinals.com/season. So the interviews with Xavin Collins, based on our interviews with Michael Bidwill and the GM Steve Keim, must have been off the charts. You heard Michael call him, I wrote it down, one of the highest character people we've ever spoken to. You heard Steve Keim moments ago say that his was one of the best interviews they conducted, very intellectual guy. And in addition to that, the size, the speed, the athleticism, his ability to cover the tight end and the running back, don't discount that. Because there are a lot of middle linebackers, as you know, Dave, who really get exposed in coverage, and you don't have the ability to put them on the tight end. Well, Budda Baker, sure, he's great at coverage, but he's under 6 feet tall. So you're going against the George Kittles of the world. If you have the ability to put a 6'5" guy like Xavin Collins and get that matchup in certain games, like against a George Kittle or an all-world tight end, that's a huge plus for Vance Joseph.
I agree. And, again, you look at the guys that were gone. The two corners that you coveted were both gone. Caleb Farley had too many medical questions. Wouldn't be surprised if he slides all the way down to the end of the first round. A wide receiver, they wanted to get a weapon for Kyler Murray, but the best four guys, including Kyle Pitts, they were gone. So what do? You start to look at your grades, right? You start to project who that you had ranked in the top 10 might slip to you at 16. And, you know, when you're making that selection at 16, you want to – some of it, of course, is potential, but it's athletic potential. When you got a guy that's smart and you know you can plug in, he's going to learn the defense, he's a guy that could play right away, all the other stuff I think eventually he'll figure out. But the fact that he's a guy that is intelligent and has high character, you're trying to – improve the leadership in that locker room. That was an issue last year. The moves that Steve Keim made this offseason were deliberate to try to improve that locker room. J.J. Watt, James Conner, Rodney Hudson, and now Xaven Collins. You know immediately going in you're going to have no issues with Xaven Collins. And you've got a young man that can come in and be a leader immediately, because he's going to be a guy that's going to figure out and know exactly where he's supposed to be and help other guys know where they're supposed to be.
You know, most of the guys refer to them as alphas. They went about this offseason trying to find alpha males to put into that locker room, not only for that toughness factor in the leadership, but guys who can make the plays, because that's where the leaders come from. If you can't lead if you're not making those plays. Xaven Collins, as a rookie, appears to check a lot of those boxes based on what we've heard and what we read in his scouting report. He was a 3-year starter. He won the Bronco Nagurski Award as the best overall defensive player. And you just flip through the scouting report here, Dave, and you see about the ability to knock back offensive linemen and get off blocks and make some of those tackles. And, the awareness of getting into the passing lanes and some of the coverages, and then how quarterbacks are trying to attack those coverages. I mentioned earlier, look, if you're Russell Wilson or you're Matthew Stafford and you're coming up to the line of scrimmage this year, think of who you have to worry about. Mm-hmm. There's Chandler Jones on the edge. There's J.J. Watt, maybe right next to him, and they're doing some games. You got Marcus Golden on the other end. You got an Ian Buda Baker. Is he coming? Is he not coming? You got Isaiah Simmons, a Xavin Collins now, who has pass rush ability. Steve Kahn mentioned that as well, just the size and speed. There's a lot for a quarterback to consider when he breaks out and comes up to the line of scrimmage. He's trying to figure, all right, who do I have to worry about right now? And there's multiple options in that regard.
And I think the other thing, and you touched on this, was over the years the Cardinals have struggled to defend the tight end. And we saw a lot of guys running free when the defense would break down in the middle of the field underneath. That's an area that you would hope now you've just strengthened, because you've got a guy there that's smart, so he's not going to make mental errors, and he's athletic. He's going to be able to cover a running back. He's going to be able to cover a tight end. And then Steve brought up the ability to blitz. So to your point, you've got another guy that a quarterback has to be concerned with as a blitzer. And when you've got a quarterback guessing, and most young quarterbacks, and it seems like in the NFL now, the guys that are playing quarterback, it's one of three. It's either a guy that's been around for 15 years, like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. It's a guy that's been a journeyman that's gone between starter and backup, or it's a rookie or second-year player. It seems like that's it. Those are the three quarterbacks you face. So usually a journeyman is someone that has struggled, right, to diagnose defenses and make decisions quickly, which is the same thing a rookie struggles with. So if you're playing games with the quarterback and you're Vance Joseph and you're trying to confuse him, most of the quarterbacks you're playing against in the NFL are going to be guys that you can fool. And that's a lot of times how defenses become great. I mean, everybody's got good players in the NFL. Everybody's got guys that can rush the passer or cover receivers. But if you've got intelligent players that you can do different things with to try to confuse the offense. I mean, Lovie Smith, I'll go back to how great Lovie Smith was as a defensive coordinator. A lot of that wasn't talent. It was where he put guys. And I think now you've got another piece that you can do different things with.
And Vance Joseph is known as a guy who loves to dial it up. He loves to be ultra-aggressive. He loves to change it up week to week. So if you have the guys who can handle it mentally and have the skill set to pull it off in terms of the scheme, that's advantage Arizona Cardinals in the defense. In fact, you know what? Let's go back up outside the draft room, and Lisa Matthews standing by again.
Yeah, guys, a lot of great reactions here. Yeah, guys, a lot of great reactions here on Twitter. I haven't even had a chance to tweet out the fact that they did pick, in fact, Xaven Collins here. But here's a tweet from J.J. Watt. Welcome to the squad, Xaven Collins. Let's work. P.S. It is a dry heat here in Arizona. They always got to let the guys, especially the new guys, know what's up here in Arizona with the heat going on. But, yeah, lots of great reactions here on Twitter. I look forward to scrolling through and seeing some more.
Look, let's zoom out here for a minute. If you're just joining us, linebacker Xaven Collins is the pick out of Tulsa, 6'5", nearly 260, a lot of athleticism, a lot of football IQ. And, Dave, we know we had the top of our Microsoft Surface, right? We had lockdown corner. We both had number one. So did Lisa. Okay, we get that. But you know what?
Cross mine off here.
The two elite corners didn't even make it out of the top 10. In fact, Dallas Cowboys had to trade down.
Yeah.
So the fact that that is still a need. Okay, either you fill that in free agency or maybe in round 2. Maybe at pick number 49, you get that next level of cornerback. For example, a Greg Newsome, a Caleb Farley, if you're satisfied with the medicals, or maybe even an Asante Samuel Jr. in round 2.
Cardinals have had a history of trading up also to get somebody early in the second round. So maybe, again, there's a player that's slipping that you have a top 20 grade on that is there at 35 or 36, and maybe you can move up to try to take a player to address that need.
All right, that'll do it for our coverage. We thank everyone for joining us. Don't forget, round 2 coverage starts tomorrow when the Cardinals go on the clock, as Lisa Matthews and Kyle Odegaard will have you covered. And then on Saturday in round 7, it will be Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Right here for Dave Pasch and Lisa Matthews, I'm Paul Calvisi. Thanks for joining us on Cardinals Draft Central, presented by the Arizona Ford Dealers.